Applying fair housing laws to real world situations. Fair housing decisions are rarely one size fits all. Throughout this course, we've explored the history of fair housing, discussed protected classes, reviewed advertising rules, and examined the Realtor Code of Ethics. Now let's apply those principles to situations Arizona real estate professionals encounter every day. Fair housing questions often arise unexpectedly during a transaction. The key is understanding when fair housing laws apply and when they do not. Using the Fair Housing logo, one question brokers frequently receive involves the Equal Housing Opportunity logo. Suppose a buyer's agent sends a text message to the listing agent advising that the home inspector will arrive Tuesday afternoon. The listing agent responds, "Please include the Fair Housing logo in all of your text messages." Is that required? The Equal Housing Opportunity logo is intended for advertising residential real estate and real estate services. It serves as a public statement that housing is being offered without unlawful discrimination. A text message between licensees coordinating a transaction is not advertising. Because the communication relates to the administration of an existing transaction rather than the marketing of property or services, the Fair Housing logo is not required. Familial status includes more than parents. Another area that often creates confusion involves familial status. Many people assume fair housing protections apply only to parents living with their own children. The law is broader than that. Familial status protections may also extend to individuals who have legal custody of a child under the age of 18 or who have written authorization from a parent or legal custodian to care for that child. For example, suppose a prospective tenant intends to live with a 12-year-old nephew while the child's parents temporarily work overseas. A landlord generally should not refuse to rent simply because a child will be living in the home. Instead, the landlord may request documentation demonstrating the applicant has the legal authority or written permission to care for the child. Registered sex offenders are not a protected class. Fair housing laws prohibit discrimination based upon protected characteristics, not every personal characteristic. For example, registered sex offenders are not a protected class under either the Federal Fair Housing Act or the Arizona Fair Housing Act. Accordingly, if a real estate professional chooses to terminate representation solely because a prospective tenant is a registered sex offender, that decision generally would not constitute unlawful fair housing discrimination. However, brokers should always ensure their decisions are based upon legitimate business considerations and consistent office policies. Your personal residence does not eliminate your fair housing responsibility. Some licensees mistakenly believe fair housing advertising rules do not apply when renting their own property. Consider this example. A licensee owns a home with a detached guest studio and wants to advertise it for a single person only. Although certain owner-occupied housing exemptions exist under the Fair Housing Act, those exemptions are very limited. More importantly, real estate licensees should never publish discriminatory advertisements. When a licensee becomes involved in the transaction, fair housing advertising requirements continue to apply. The safest practice is simple. Advertise the property, not the preferred occupant. Disability and property showings. Suppose a buyer uses a wheelchair. The seller refuses to allow the showing because it recently rained and they're concerned about damage to the carpet. Even after the buyer offers to remain on the tiled portions of the home, the seller refuses. May the seller deny the showing? No. Both the Federal Fair Housing Act and the Arizona Fair Housing Act prohibit making housing unavailable because of a person's disability. Reasonable efforts should be made to provide the buyer with the same opportunity to view the property as any other prospective purchaser. Religion also includes non-belief. Fair housing protections involving religion extend beyond traditional faiths. Courts have recognized that protections relating to religion also include individuals who identify as atheists or who choose not to practice a religion. Accordingly, a seller cannot instruct a broker to advertise that a property will only be sold to religious buyers, or refuse to sell solely because a buyer identifies as an atheist. The broker must decline that instruction because it would violate fair housing laws. Recovery programs and fair housing. Another situation occasionally arises when a buyer intends to use a home as a residence for individuals recovering from alcohol or drug addiction. Individuals recovering from addiction who are no longer illegally using controlled substances may qualify as persons with disabilities under the Fair Housing Act. A seller generally may not refuse to sell a home simply because it will be used as a residence for individuals participating in recovery. As with many fair housing issues, each situation should be evaluated carefully based upon current law and the specific facts involved. The common theme, although these situations appear very different, they all share one important principle. Fair housing decisions should never be based upon assumptions, stereotypes, or personal preferences. Instead, every transaction should be evaluated using objective facts, consistent business practices, and a commitment to providing equal professional service. That approach protects consumers, brokers, and the integrity of the real estate profession. Broker tip: whenever a client asks you to do something that makes you uncomfortable from a fair housing perspective, pause before responding. Many fair housing violations begin with a well meaning client making an improper request. Your responsibility is to follow the law, not simply follow instructions. Online discussion question: why isn't the Equal Housing Opportunity logo required in every communication between real estate licensees? Answer: the logo is intended for advertising real estate or real estate services. Routine communications between licensees regarding an existing transaction are not considered advertising. Question: why are consistent business policies important when making fair housing decisions? Consistent policies help ensure every consumer is treated equally while reducing the risk of discrimination claims. Question: what is the common lesson shared by all of these fair housing examples? Answer: real estate professionals should base decisions on objective business factors and legal requirements, rather than assumptions, stereotypes, or personal preferences.